Well, welcome to the Iowa blog and to our library studio. I'm your host, Craig Winn. Today is Tuesday. It is the 29th of September, 2025, which means, at least here in the U.S. Virgin Islands, we're about 30 hours away from celebrating Yom Kipurym. Yom Kipurym is the sixth of 7 annual meetings between God and his people. And it is a marvelous invitation to not only meet with God, but to embrace our returning Messiah and King. You see, every one of the 7 mikre has a dress rehearsal that points us to them so that we have an appreciation of what they're going to represent in our lives and a day certain when they will be fulfilled. And the final 3 moed mikre, which would be Towrah, Kipurym, and Sukkah, are all going to be fulfilled in succession, just as were the first 3 mikre. They were fulfilled in succession, Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, in year 4000 Yah 33 CE, while the final 3 are fulfilled in 2033, which is year 6000 Yah. On Kipurym itself, it will be fulfilled on the 2nd of October, 6:22 p.m. as the sun sets in Jerusalem. That is when Yahowah, as God's one and only name, will return with his beloved son, to David, who will be king forevermore. At that time, we're actually told that Dode will be as brilliant as the sun in God's presence, affirming that Dode is, in fact, the greater luminary spoken of on the 4th day of creation, and that he will be Elyon in God's presence, which is to say that his influence will manifest everything that is needed from Yahowah himself. These are extraordinary things to say about a man, but this is the most extraordinary man who ever lived. And the day of reconciliations is when his people are reconciled back unto him and unto Yahowah. It follows, of course, Towrah, which is the greatest show on earth, where so many things transpire that make this day possible, things that we have discussed in great detail in other programs. And it all leads to the restoration of the planet into the conditions enjoyed during Eden, where we on Sukkah are allowed back into the garden to camp out with Father and Son forevermore. Now, Yahowah's discussion of this day of Yom Kipurym, and it's always Kipurym, plural, because there are many being reconciled on this day, begins with these words. Then Yahowah declared the word to Moshe, saying, exclusively during the 10th of the 7th month is the day of reconciliations, Kipurym. This exists as a set-apart and special invitation to be called out and to meet, and for you to approach. Then it is your nephesh soul which should respond and appear before this feminine manifestation of the fiery light to approach Yahowah. Kara called out Leviticus 23, 26, and 27. In our last program, I shared something that I thought was quite profound. First time, really, that I have isolated and zoned in on it so that we could all gain from it. And I'm going to reemphasize that here because I think it is an insight that has been lost on the world for the better part of 3,000 years. And that's the reason that Yahowah uses Isha, which can be translated one of 2 ways in English from the Hebrew. Ish is the Hebrew word for fire in the masculine, and Isha is the word for fire in the feminine. And while Ish is the Hebrew word for man, Isha is the Hebrew word for woman. So bringing these things together would be the feminine manifestation of the fiery light that we are to appear before. Now, you might ask why a fiery light and why the feminine version of it. And what I shared with you in a previous program, I think it was yesterday from this very library, was that the reason it was written as Ishe versus Ish is because the invitation is being made to our nephesh souls. And soul is a feminine term in Hebrew. Yahweh wants you to make this important distinction, that your physical body has nothing to do with a relationship with him. It isn't your physical body that benefits from Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, Shabuah, Towrah, Kipurym, or Sukkah. It is your soul. And so by making soul feminine and the light that we walk towards, that we embrace on this day, feminine, you see the connection between these things and understand why it's so important. Because you see, in Judaism, as well as Christianity and Islam, they're all fixated on the salvation of the body. They think that the body is corrupt and therefore it has to be saved. And they all believe in bodily resurrection. And this is utter and complete nonsense. And what God is saying, it's your soul that matters, not your body. In fact, your body is a liability. You can't be immortal with a body. You can't be perfected with a body. You can't leave this planet and go anywhere beyond the moon with this body. And there's a big universe out there with 2 trillion galaxies, with hundreds of billions of stars in each of them. Lots to explore. There's a spiritual realm named Shamayim that's in the 7th dimension, and you can't leave the 3rd dimension while you've got a physical body. It decays. It's an tremendous burden. And so God is equating our nephesh soul, which is so valuable. It's the reservoir of our personalities, of our attitudes, of our attributes, of our experiences. And it is our soul which gets to transition this mortal life that is so finite and so limiting and enter the eternity of a perfected relationship with Yahweh. Now, why fire, you might ask? Why would God invite us on this day to appear before a fire? Well, what is it that makes fire special? Does it not devour decaying organic material and turn it into energy and light? And isn't that what God is offering us through Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, Shabuah, Towrah, and now Kipurym? That these physical bodies of ours are currently the reservoir for our souls, and that by the fiery light, they are transformed, they are energized. We enjoy E equals MC squared, where our relative merit is increased by the speed of the speed of light squared. That's quite the increase, don't you think? And that is what God is offering us, and that's why the metaphor exists, to approach the fiery light, so that we then can approach Yahweh, who is spiritual energy and light. We become like him, just like the fire devours that which is useless and elevates that which was dying and decaying into something magnificent like light and energy. So our nephesh soul is our consciousness. Common to all animals, it is the essence of life. It is what makes us aware. The differential between plants and animals is that animals have souls, which enables them to observe and respond to the environment around us, to be responsive. And when you see an invitation like this from Yahweh, it is for us to respond, for us to reply. It is precisely what we need to be able to shamar, observe in the Word of God, so that we can respond. Yahweh provided humankind with a nasama, a conscience, and that is different than consciousness. A nephesh is consciousness, this form of life that enables us to, as I say, observe and respond to our environment. But a nasama is what enables us to relate to God. It enables us to be judgmental, to exercise good judgment, to discern between right and wrong, good and bad, productive and counterproductive. A nesama is required to process the information in the tree of knowledge so that we can grasp hold of the tree of lives. And so with our nesama, we can journey with our soul from here to there, giving us the ability to think logically and to make reasoned and moral decisions about who God is, what he is offering and asking in return. Now, this is an aspect of our nature that is currently, well, it's ebbing away, this nesama, because it ceases to be functional in most people because it is unused. And Marxism, it is something that you're encouraged to disregard. Marxism, they don't want people exercising good judgment. They don't want them thinking. They don't want them processing information and responding in a judgmental fashion because, well, Marxism doesn't hold up to good judgment. It's a failed system. Man collectively is worse than man individually. But the same thing is true with religion. You have to have a dysfunctional nesama to believe the stupidity of Christianity or Judaism or Islam. I mean, those religions are so easily disproved. I mean, here's volume 3 of 5 disproving Islam, each 825 pages long, each with multiple proofs against the credibility of Allah as a God and Muhammad as a prophet and the Quran as a thoughtful book over and over and over and over again. Same thing is true with Twistianity. I prove that God is not a man, that men cannot kill God, that Jesus never existed. Paul made him up in 52 CE, that resurrection, bodily resurrection, is counterproductive. It's the stuff of pagan deities, and that the Christian New Testament never once cites God accurately, never once mentions his name, and is completely false. And then in the series called Babel, I proceed to undress rabbinic Judaism so that you know that it is also untrue. So it's important that humankind use their nesama to think their way out of religion and away from politics so that you're receptive to who Yahweh really is, to his name, to his beloved son, Dod, to the actual intent of the 7 Moed Mikre, to where we are on his timeline, what's going to happen to Yisrael over these next 7+ years, so that you know who the great betrayer is, and you, to the greatest extent possible, try to expose and condemn the role of Donald Trump in destroying Israel and the world. These are things that you can use your nesama, seated here and here, to process information effectively. Now, in the material realm, as mortals, we do need both a body and a soul to function. But in the spiritual realm, physical bodies would become an enormous liability. So all that matters for those transitioning from one realm to another is our nefesh. It is the repository of almost everything that makes you, you, including your attitudes and your aptitudes, your personality, your character, and the memory of your past experiences and aspirations. This understanding of this integration between a potentially immortal nefesh soul and an absolutely mortal body helps us better understand how it was possible for Yahweh to send Dod's nefesh soul back a second time, 1,000 years after his first life, to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and how he could take Dod's nefesh soul and to put it into a Bashar body so that he could sacrifice that body to fulfill Pesach and have While he gave us something as a great gift, he lost nothing in the process. And then how he could carry our guilt with him into Sheol, protected by the Ruach of Yahweh, so that he could resolve our guilt. Well, it was just one day amongst an eternity of years. So it was a great gift that will pay dividends forever for all of us, and even for Dode and for Yahowah. So it's important that you understand the difference between a physical body and why physical bodies are meaningless, why resurrection as it exists in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is so absurdly counterproductive. And why, quite simply, the only part of you that matters and should matter to you is your soul. And your soul can only be redeemed by what Yahweh and Dode achieved on Pesach, Matzah, and Kipurym. And it can only escape this world alive as an immortal being on Sukkah, on Shabuah and Towrah. And those who are left, this mortal remnant, both of Israelites and of Goyim, come to Ruah, who are processed through the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. Numbers 19 intersects with Numbers 5, all explained in Numbers 12. Well, you will have the opportunity for your nefesh soul to live on and maybe even become immortal based on the decisions you make pertaining to Father and Son, Yahweh and Dode. So, as I say, in the material realm, we need these physical bodies. In the spiritual realm, they are a tremendous liability. So Yom Kippurim is the sixth step on the path from being a spiritual being to being, from being mortal, if you will, to being spiritual and eternal, from being flawed to being perfected, from being limited to being liberated. Those who have answered Yahweh's summons to attend Pesach, Matzah, and Kipurym, Shabuah, Towrah, and Kipurym have discovered that these celebrations of life exist to benefit our souls, not for our bodies. They have no value whatsoever to our bodies. Now, a time will come, and now less than 8 years, on Towrah, where I have been asked by Yahweh and Dode to sacrifice mine. It'll be bludgeoned to death, likely from the testimony I'm reading, every bone broken. But it's a physical body. It's something I'll be delighted to be done with. And to be able to give something that has absolutely no ongoing value for the benefit of this mortal remnant and for thousands and thousands of people to enjoy an eternal relationship with Yahweh is clearly worthwhile. I think we have Rich adjusting the camera. It looked like it may have gotten knocked off kilter, but now, oh no, so Rich, you have it at a real angle here, the other way now. You can see that if you got your glasses on, we're really tilted out of perspective. The camera's got to come up. You've got to actually release it on. There's a screw beneath it, and you need to release it. It's so far off that it needs to be corrected. So if you release it, there you go. Now you're getting closer. Let's just lock it down there. That's at least close enough. I'll get it at the end of this program. Okay. We have our camera for this program. It is in what used to be the area in front of my desk. This was the writing desk that I wrote 35 books at. Well, not all of them, because I wrote many of the books before we moved here to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I wrote several on our boat called Kara. And prior to that, and my various homes across the country. But all of the most recent rewrites in the last, it's now 7 years worth of effort were all from this desk right here. in a room that I transformed into my study. And now, of course, it is filled with lights and cameras and streaming computer equipment and microphones and all manner of things. And when people come in and clean the room or work in this room now, they walk past that camera, and it's easy to knock off kilter. So I apologize for the interruption, but these things happen because they say this is a work environment that we transformed from a wonderful study where I enjoyed many moments learning from Yahowah and expressing and sharing what he had taught me, to a period where Yahowah says, I want you to talk to my people. I want you to get cameras and lights and microphones and live stream what you have learned, so that they might come to know me again, so that they might come to embrace what you've come to know about my beloved son. So that is why we're here. And normally I would check the screen to see if we're all square and level, and we're not quite at this point, but we're so much closer, we're going to call it good enough and continue this program. So Yom Kippurim clearly is the sixth of 7 steps. If you look over my left shoulder, you'll see a menorah that is turning. Over my right shoulder, you'll see a menorah that is crafted more in the original form. That 6th of 7 lights represents Yom Kippurim. It is a 6+1 plan that brings us back home over the period of 6 + 1,000 years. So 6,000 years from the time we were escorted out of the Garden of Eden to the time that we'll be brought back into the Garden of Eden, and another 1,000 years then in celebrating Sukkah, where we camp out with God on earth, and the conditions mimicking what we experienced in Eden so long ago. So those who have answered the summons that Yahowah has made to attend Pesach, Matzah, Kipurym, Shabu, and Towrah are now immortal covenant members, watching and participating in Yahweh's return with Dod, who are also, of course, immortal beings. And those that the sacrifice of the Adam Parah has benefited, and that Eliah has explained as the master of ceremonies, these many thousands of Yehudim, Yisraelites, and Goyim gathered in Yisrael for this day for the return of Father and Son, well, they too will have benefited enormously by the events of these last 15 days. Therefore, Yahowah is summoning souls to answer his invitation to meet with him. He prepares our souls to enter his presence through contact with the set-apart spirit, this marvelous manifestation, if you will, of his fiery light and what it can do for us. And that explains why these instructions were issued in this way. So there is no question that a nephesh is used to describe our souls, and that a nephesh is feminine, as is Isha, this fire. And for reasons that I've articulated, it's important for you to know that it is our souls, not our bodies, which benefit from Yahweh's provision. And while that sounds simple enough, rabbis have managed to totally misconstrue Yahweh's intent. In their twisted minds, Jews must deny themselves on this day, doing numbers of things, including fasting, which is a physical thing, is it not? Wrong. And they twirl chickens over their head, and just mean. Moreover, fasting actually deprives the body, and God was addressing our soul. To contravene Yahweh's intent and negate the ensuing benefits, rabbis had to mistranslate, misrepresent, and misconstrue most of what Yahowah said. For example, they turned this, and I'm going to read it, and then I'll tell you what they turned it into. Then Yahowah declared the word to Moshe, saying, exclusively during the 10th of the 7th month is the day of reconciliations. This exists as a set apart and special invitation to be called out and meet a mikra, for you to approach then your soul should respond and appear before this feminine manifestation of the fiery light to approach Yahowah. That was corrupted into the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, mark the 10th day of the 7th month is the day of atonement, and it shall be sacred, a sacred occasion for you. And you shall practice self-denial, and you shall bring an offering by fire to the Lord. Pathetic. I mean, absolutely pathetic. To claim that a Bible, and this happened to be from the Jewish Publication Society, JPS, their Tanakh, to claim that it is the Word of God is to completely misrepresent God. It says Yahweh, doesn't say Lord. It does not say Mark. The word day is not there, unless it's addressing the Day of Atonement, but it doesn't say the 10th day. It's just the 10th of the 7th month. You ought to be smart enough to figure it out. And it doesn't say sacred, doesn't even say occasion, does not ask anyone to practice self-denial. There is no offering by fire, and it isn't to the Lord. Besides that, well, they were reasonably accurate. They've got spoke. They've got a corruption of Moshe. They've got 10. They've got 7. They got month. They've got day. I've probably got a U in there that's accurate too. But all the rest of it's wrong. Why? What gives man the right to change the words of God? Well, in the opening sentence, they ignored the wah, which is the conjunction that tells us so much about whether or not something is related to something that preceded it. And in the opening sentence, they then changed Yahowah to the Lord. God wrote Yahowah. You think Yahowah knows his name? I suppose he does. They independently or inadequately rendered Debar, which would be word and spoken word. And they misspelled Moshe, which means to draw out. They incorrectly translated Ak, which means exclusively, not mark. They ignored Ba and added the first day without textual support. In the second sentence, they mistranslated Kodesh as sacred when it doesn't mean anything of the kind. It means set apart, unique, special, uncommon. It's that which isn't religious or political. And they completely misrendered Mikra, which is an invitation to be called out to meet with God, which are the only words, by the way, in the whole thing that matter. In the third statement, they completely ignored Nefesh, which means soul, and they mistranslated Anna, changing it from you should respond to you should practice self-denial. It's reprehensible. Then they changed the meaning of karab, appear before, to bring. Ishe, which is either fire or female, became offering by fire, as if the fate of the woman is depicted thereby in Judaism. And for bad measure, they replaced Yahowah a second time, changing it to Satan's title, the Lord. Is it any wonder Jews are misled? Is there any wonder Jews have no idea who Yahweh is? Is there any wonder they cringe when I bring up his name? That they have no aptitude for appreciating the fact that Yom Kippurim is the day of reconciliations, and that we are to respond to Yahweh's invitations to meet, and that this isn't the first month of the year, but the 7th. Therefore, Rosh Hashanah is Babylonian and erroneous. They have been misled by Judaism, rabbis. Now, of the 37 words, including prepositions, articles, and conjunction in Yahweh's declaration, there's only one subject to interpretation. And that's the one that I highlighted before we began, Ishe. Therefore, other than being dumb, blind, and religious, there is no excuse for the other 13 mistakes. Going out on a limb here, I think we can credit Yahweh with knowing his own name. And since he declared these words to Moshe, methinks men have to be exceedingly full of themselves to replace God's name with a title of their choosing. But at least they were consistent, and that it could be a good thing after all, had it not served to repeat, the same mistake. And when I say it could be a good thing, if Rabbinic Judaism, responsible for the JPS Tanakh, had actually used Yahweh's name and drug that glorious name into their religious malfeasance, it would have tarnished his name, would have sullied his name. The very fact that they removed his name and then went ahead and spewed their lies makes their lives a lot less damning. Now, misrepresenting Kodesh is inexcusable. Not only because the word's meaning is clearly known, or because it is used to describe so many things special to God, but because being separated from religion to become set apart and thus special to Yahweh is essential. It's a prerequisite in the covenant. Kodesh is among the most important concepts to ascertain when dealing with Yahweh's lexicon. God uses it here to underscore the fact that his mikre are different than religious holidays, making them unique, special, and uncommon. And their purpose is to Kodesh, to enable us to transition from religion to a relationship. Sacred, however, takes the unwary in the opposite direction. To rob mikra of its relevance by rendering it an occasion is a horrible crime. Its very composition begs us to ponder the implications of kara, being summoned and invited, reading and reciting, being greeted and welcomed, while making proclamations about being called out. How is one to know what to do when the instructions are all tossed aside and trampled by the religious? And speaking of instructions, perhaps the rabbis can explain why God, who created our nephesh soul, would have used this word as the subject of the sentence, and then to describe the invitees if his intent was for their souls to be excluded. Asked another way, since these words were spoken by God and written in the Torah by Moshe, what gives man the right to alter God's testimony? Do the rabbis actually think that they're smarter and more articulate than Yahweh? Well, the answer is obviously yes, they do. Or they would not have written their Talmud. They wouldn't have changed the Torah. Translating the next word, anah, is not difficult, and yet rabbis managed to butcher it. The verb appears over 400 times in the Torah and the prophets. Especially telling, it is used repeatedly in connection with the mikre, these invitations. Anah means to answer, to respond, and to reply. That is the most intelligent thing to do, indeed polite, when receiving a summons or an invitation from the Almighty. Further, this is Yom Kipurym, the day of reconciliations, denoting Yahweh's return on behalf of his family. How dense do the Hasidics have to be to turn such a wonderful occasion into a day of deprivation and affliction? Oh, we're so sad God is returning. Oh, it's the end of us. Whoa. What are we going to do if Yahweh returns? We're all out of a job. We're done. Oh, let's deprive ourselves. Let's afflict ourselves. What could be worse than the people actually reforming a relationship with Yahweh and bypassing us? How will we make money? How will we seek fame? Keeping it real, rendering Anah as you shall practice self-denial, requires a level of stupidity that is unfathomable. It is akin to saying, God is coming to save us, so quick, let's deny him, and let's keep him from being able to do so. It's a slap in the face, something rabbis are quite accomplished at doing. Well, it's almost always appropriate to translate Anah, reply, answer, and respond. Now, it can also be rendered testify, become a witness and sing, or listen and then speak. On rare occasions, should the context dictate no other option, Anah can be rendered as afflict. For example, in Mitzrayim, the children of Israel were Anah, oppressed and suffered under religious and political persecution. However, since the Mikra exists as God's means to free his people from such suffering, it is certain that they do not exist to impose misery. Being afflicted, disturbed, and oppressed, in a state of anxiety and distress, being miserable and wretched, being raped and violated in humility, denying oneself is not how we celebrate a reunion with God when our relationship is reconciled. If you cannot get this word right in this context, you have no business speaking for or being anywhere near God. You're conveying the opposite of his intent. That's not good. Now, as we move on to the next word, karab is a verb appearing nearly 300 times. Its meaning is so clear that to misrepresent it implies intent to deceive. Karab conveys to approach, to come and draw near, and to be present in close proximity. It does not mean, as the JPS published, bring or bring an offering. To karab is to be present, not to bring a present. In our initial encounter with Ishay and Isha, depending on how the word is vocalized and as it's written in the text, there is no distinction between the two. And as a matter of fact, the hey at the end of the word would be pronounced ah in about 99% of all circumstances, just like it is in Torah, just like it is in Yahowah. I was forthright in explaining the possibilities. I've always been. I always put every card up, face up on the table, tell you how to spell them, how to look them up, how to verify things for yourself. And what I have told you is that Isha can be one of two things. It is either a woman, female, or it is the feminine variation of Esh for fire. The same word is written the same way. And so it is a symbol that Yahweh is using to convey what he is offering on this day. Not what we are offering, what he is offering, so that we can approach him. And for us to approach him, our souls need to be enveloped in light and energy. And the way to do that is to approach the very fiery light of God. And in this day, those who are going to be able to approach God have been purged of their religiosity by the fire that Yahweh has set underneath the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah, with light and fire billowing up into the heavens and dancing up to the sky. God wants you to feel comfortable in that presence. You know, when Yahweh was the fiery light on the top of Mount Choreb, and he invited Moshe to come up and meet with him. Moshe was a bit reluctant at first, and Yahweh says, "Come on, take your shoes off, get comfortable. Let's sit around here and chat. Well, let me introduce myself by name, so you know who I am. We'll have a lovely talk. I'm gonna tell you what I want, and the like." And Yahweh said, "I'm going to bring you back to the same place." They came back to that place, and Yahweh's fiery light appeared on top of Mount Choreb again. And God told Moshe, "Listen, I want you to go down and you give your people 3 days to get all dressed up, all cleaned up, all prepared, get their minds right. And then I'm going to appear beside you with this fiery light. And I'm going to explain to them in my voice that I am the one inspiring you, that Creator God of the universe is offering this message to you." And so Yahweh did, and the children of Israel responded very, very inappropriately. But they were exposed to the very fiery light of God. They happened to tell God to go away and that they never wanted to see him or hear from him again. And so when Yahweh is returning, he's going to preface his return by this great fire under the sacrifice of the Adam of Perah. And going to use that fire to extinguish all who are opposed to him, the political, the religious, the anti-Semites, the conspiratorial. They'll all be incinerated. And those who are in Jerusalem, who have the right attitude and aptitude to proceed into the millennial Shabat, they're going to be purged by that fire. And then when Yahweh returns with Dode, we're told that Dode will be so brilliant, he'll be as brilliant as the sun. You getting the picture? It's a transformation. It's an empowerment. It's an enablement for our souls. This is important for you to have as an appreciation. So Yahweh chose to manifest his presence to the children of Israel using Esh fire for a reason. Fire provides light. It attracts attention. It is warm. It is beautiful. When approached correctly, it can be exceedingly valuable to us, or incorrectly, destructive. It can be used to remove pathogens from water and to cook food which would otherwise be unpalatable or unsafe. And speaking of safety, fires are used to protect a campsite and to extend our journey into night, giving families the opportunity to commune together and longer. And the heat and smoke of a fire rise up to the heavens, symbolic of the Mikre's purpose. In addition, with the transformation of our nature from physical to spiritual during the Moed, fire converts organic material into energy and light. God uses metaphors that are phenomenally insightful, does he not? But have you ever had them explained to you previously? Now, this realization and these insights may be the peripheral reason why Yahweh asked Moshe to scribe Isha, this feminine depiction of fire, into his invitation. With these metaphors in mind, concepts as familiar to us today as they were 4,000 years ago, we can see why Yahweh would ask us to approach him by way of the purifying warmth, protection, enlightenment, and transformative nature of a fiery light. Now, the projection of both a transformative effect on our nature is also evident in the very nature of the covenant, where we are embraced as part of God's family. As a seven-dimensional being, Yahweh cannot enter the three-dimensional realm that he created for us without using symbols, probes, projections, messengers, implements, and of course his words. Fire is one of those symbols. It symbolizes light, the principal metaphor for Yahweh's nature. He has a nephesh, which he can use as a probe or a projection of his nature. But his spirit, his ruach, is another way that he can convey his presence. A malach can serve as a messenger and implement to convey his presence as well. Now, so that you have some appreciation for what Yahweh wants us to overcome by way of these amplified translations, The Jewish Publication Society was not the only religious institution corrupting the Word of God. The English Standard Bible reads, "It shall be for you a time of holy convocation, and you shall afflict yourselves and present a food offering to the Lord." Well, there is no word for time. There's no word for holy. There's no word for convocation. There's only a word for afflict if you go to like the 10th definition and bypass all of the appropriate definitions in this context of anah. It was nefesh, soul, not yourselves. It was no present being called for or being offered. No food mentioned, and no Lord in the text. The King James Bible presents, "And ye shall afflict your souls, an offering made by fire unto the Lord." No afflicting, but they at least got souls right. No offering, but they wrote it twice. There is no mention to made by fire, just simply a fire. There is no mention here of approaching. And of course, there was no Lord in God's statement. Knowing that afflict was wrong, of course, the New American Standard Bible substituted humble, but otherwise changed ye to you. The New International Version replaced souls with yourselves and afflict with deny, as did the NILT, the New Living Non-Translation, a paraphrase. Although their paraphrase concludes with, "and present special gifts to the Lord." The Lord is Satan, so you can choose whatever gift you want to give him that you think is special. Now, if not for my affection for monkeys, I would say monkey see, monkey do. But monkeys, while sometimes menacing, are never deliberately evil. Changing the words Yahweh conveyed to invite us to be reconciled into terminology leading the unwary in the opposite direction personifies evil. While I do not claim to be inerrant, I can say for certain that the JPS, English Standard Version, New American Standard Bible, New International Version, and New Living Translation are absolutely wrong. But they're not alone. Every popular English Bible made really all of the same mistakes. And this is no small point. Yahweh will go on to say that he will destroy the souls of those who fail to answer his summons and appear before him on this day. And while that may sound harsh, it's actually for the benefit of his children. No one should have to endure an eternity of religious shenanigans or be around people who weren't bright enough to realize they were being played for fools by those who wrote the New Testament, the Talmud, and the Quran. Continuing on our quest for knowledge, when we searched the word, we discovered that Ishay's first use is in Shemoth, Exodus 29:18, while it appears again in Shemoth 29:25, 29:41, and 30:20. Yahweh usually defines his term in their first application. For those interested in searching other instances, Ishay, most of those occurrences are found in Kara Leviticus, beginning in 2:11, 2:16, 3:3, 3:9, 3:11, 3:14, and 3:16. You'll find Ishay again in Kara 22:22 and 22:27. And then throughout the Mikre discussion, 23:8, 23:13, 23:25, and 23:27, as if Yahweh was really insistent that we understand that we, our nefesh, are invited to approach him by way of the Ishay, this feminine manifestation of a fiery light. It is rendered twice in this presentation in Kara. changed to Leviticus, meaning called out, 23:26, and also twice in 23:37. Variations of Ishe, which are Ish and Isha, are found beginning in Leviticus 1:9, 23:18, and 24:9. Now, turning to the first use of the word in Shemot 29:18, we find Qatar being written to convey burning of an al, or a male sacrificial lamb, which olah rises up to Yahweh. While olah simply means to rise, it is commonly rendered a burnt offering, but it is spelled identically to Allah, which with the ain is not the Allah of Islam. That would be with the aleph. But the verb means to rise. So olah and Allah, written exactly the same way in Hebrew, means to rise, not burnt offering. The fact that it is deployed 286 times in this context to convey the idea of something that is uplifting is one of the reasons that I'm reluctant to render Ishe the same way. Why would you have two different words written entirely different that convey exactly the same message when none of them speaks of burnt, none of them speaks of offering? God has a word to describe the nature of an offering that rises, and that word is olah, not Ishe. So to fully appreciate the meaning of Ishe in Shemot 29:18, let's consider its use in the context of the whole statement. Yahweh says, burn, that is Qatar, rendering as smoke, the entire lamb, al, on the altar. It, Allah, rises up to ascend towards Yahweh as the spirit of soothing acceptance. This feminine manifestation of the fiery light, Isha, serves as a counselor, reconciling us to approach Yahweh. In the context of a sacrificial lamb, of conciliating and reconciling, as a counselor, as something that helps us rise up, of a soothing spirit of acceptance, the feminine manifestation of the fiery light is a perfectly appropriate definition. It defines the role that fire plays in this transformation of our nephesh souls. And I suppose that is why the root of Reach is Ruach, spirit. Further, this connection of Nyok is related to Nuach, meaning to settle down as a beneficiary of what would be considered amnesty. Now, the only way for us to rise up and be included in Yahweh's family is through this transformation that is facilitated by the fire. This is the meaning behind this second of 7 instructions. And it is something we should all be cognizant of. Now, with that considered, I'm comfortable with the following translation. Then Yahweh declared the word to Moshe, saying, exclusively during the 10th of the 7th month is the day of reconciliations. This exists as a set apart and special invitation to be called out and meet a mikra, for you to approach. Then your soul should respond and appear before the feminine manifestation of the fiery light to approach Yahweh. Now, continuing to Yahweh's next statement regarding the day of reconciliations, the source of life reports, so do not perform any of the service of the spiritual messenger, the malach, of the duties of the heavenly representative, the spiritual council, during this life-sustaining and essential day. Indeed, the day of reconciliations is to make amends, to pardon, to forgive, to reconcile the relationship, kafar, to release from guilt, to ransom, having all offenses annulled and removed, to purge and to cover over, providing atonement, for you all before the appearance and in the presence of Yahweh, your God. Torah called out. Leviticus 23:28. On this day, we are being invited to do something really special, to enter into the presence of God's fiery light so that we can approach Yahweh and enjoy the companionship of his Son, to be purged of our guilt, and to be rid of the menace of really our physical bodies. The limitations is probably a better way to phrase it, so that we can rise up and transition the dimensions from 3 to 4, 5, 6, and 7. The implication is therefore that the Malaka, the spiritual counselor, will take it from there, doing all that is required. The result is that there is no reason for her efforts, even if they were possible, beyond what is being conveyed by this feminine manifestation of the fire, transforming us if we answer God's invitation. Now, the set-apart spirit, the Ruach Kodesh, is tasked with the responsibility of communicating God's presence to us, enhancing our understanding of the word. The Choder is enhanced with the 7 Ruach of Yahweh. And she actually performed a marvelous role in our perfection, because had it not been for Yahweh's projection of his Ruach enveloping Dod's Nefesh soul, Dod would not have survived or been successfully released from Sheol. The only reason that Dod was able to enter Sheol and be taken back out of Sheol is because of the protection that the Ruach provides. So imbued with her energy, we are not only enlightened and empowered, but we can become immortal. That what makes this day a stem, life-sustaining and essential. Now, God's Son, our Messiah, the Zeroah, paid the ransom to make amends on Pesach, and most importantly, by going into Sheol on Matzah. And this is what's being offered. Now, should we have not done our homework, I should say, and had not explored the actionable root of Kipurym, God comes to the rescue here, as he usually does. Sometimes we just get a little ahead of the story. And he tells us that the verb that underlines Kipurym, which is Kippur in the plural form, is kafar. And he invites you to consider its implications. And it describes what is occurring on Yom Kippurim. God is making amends by pardoning us, forgiving us, reconciling the relationship by having provided the ransom to release us from the control of others and from resulting guilt. On this day, all offenses are annulled and removed. We are purged of every mistake when God's light and the previous darkness are removed. God's light covers this darkness. Now, it should be noted that we have learned that the remedy for the mortal remnant of Yisrael is actually provided by the Adam of Torah. All of those who benefit from this purging that Dod provided by carrying our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there on Matzah will have occurred 2,000 years prior to this event. And the 2 harvests of covenant members, Shabu and Towrah, will have occurred 7 years or just a matter of 10 days prior to Kipurym. But it is on the day of Kipurym, on the Shabat, the 24th of September, 2033, that all the remnant of Yisrael and the Goyim who've been brought to this point will be kafar. They're going to be purged. and it is the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah which makes this possible. And they will have had this happen to them 10 days before this great celebration. So this helps us understand and underscore the fact that the religious notion that Jews are to afflict their souls on Yom Kippurim is not only wrong, but it's the inverse of Yahweh's message and plan. The fact is that Yahweh allowed his firstborn soul to be afflicted on, well, his body to be afflicted on Passover and his soul on unyeasted bread, so that our souls could receive the benefit. He allowed this to occur for the express purpose of reconciling his people into the covenant family. And if I may, considering what Yahweh is offering through kafar, the JPS notion that we should deny ourselves is rendered foolish in the extreme. Now, there are two subtle insights here we ought not miss. Estem, translated as this life-sustaining and essential, very substantive, exacting, and invigorating, even corporeal day in Kara 23:28, conveys the idea that it will be upon Yom Kippurim that the essential essence of Yahweh will be seen along with the corporeal nature of Dod. That is to say, the Day of Reconciliations presents the Mikra upon which Yahweh will return, and he will bring his son, Dod, back with him as Elion and as brilliant as the sun. The fact that he is coming to restore his relationship, or enjoy actually a relationship that has now been restored because of what took place on Towrah, it makes it possible for this remnant of Yisrael and Yehudim and the gathered Goyim to enjoy what is really the most essential day in human history. It follows the greatest show on earth. So STEM underscores the role of of all that God has laid before us, of this great transformation. It speaks of empowering and invigorating, of being life-sustaining, but a stem means that those who benefit from this day are going to have a backbone. They're going to be standing erect, that they're not going to be all bowed over or hunched over or on their knees, just the opposite. Now, along these lines, and perhaps as a confirmation, we are told that all of this would occur la pene, before the appearance in the presence of Yahweh. These insights strongly suggest that we should mark our calendars in the recognition that Yahweh will be returning with his beloved Son, the Messiah and King, on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah. And yes, Maimonides in his screwball sanctification of the moon scheduling was 197 years off. We are just 8 years shy now of year 6000 Yah. You better get ready. This will occur at sunset in Jerusalem, the 2nd of October, 2033. And yes, I am extrapolating from these clues, but I have it on really good authority. Because there's only one way to God, a straight path through the 7 invitations to be called out and meet. Therefore, Yahweh warned, truthfully, any soul which by association does not answer and respond, lo ana, during this life-sustaining and essential estem day, that soul will be cut off and either eliminated or separated. Karat. It's actually she, because it's speaking of the nefesh, soul, being feminine, will be severed, ceasing to exist, or banished, excluded and destroyed, or exiled per the agreement in the Nifl Perfect, The subject, which is the soul, both carries out and receives the consequence of being cut off at this moment. In other words, if that happens to you, it will be because of you. And it's separated from being with its family. The family, of course, is the bereth, from Bayeth, family, meaning the covenant. Leviticus 23:29. This is the place that we will return on our next program. And so I'll not belabor the point, but beyond to say, the only thing of value is your nefesh soul, no matter what happens to your body. If your soul is right with Yahowah, you will live forever in his presence. You will inherit everything that he has to offer. And therefore, it is essential that your soul responds to what God is offering and answers this invitation to meet on this essential day, during this life-sustaining day, Yom Kippur, so that your soul is not cut off and is not eliminated or separated from the covenant family. Please, it's God's invitation to you. It's his gift to you. Consider it. Act upon it. Benefit from it. I thank you for listening. Have a good evening.